Guys, welcome. My name is Paul Shurtleff. I'm from Springville, Utah. I tie on a few different pro teams, and so anyway, today I'm going to tie two of the very most productive dry fly patterns. The one in my vise right now, I've named this my PFC. It stands for Polly's Fluttering Caddis. It's actually an old Dave Whitlock knockoff. So I can't really claim full originality, but how I've tied it is a little bit different than probably how anybody or how he has or Dave Whitlock tied it. So anyway, I'm going to start off with a Moonlit ML 052. This is a number 16. Can you guys see that okay? All right. And so this is actually a pretty super simple pattern, and the simplicity is the beauty is in the simplicity of it. It's only 3 materials. So I've got so for the body I'm using some dubbing, and for the wing is some elk hair, and then your choice of hackle. I like the saddle hackles. This is just a grizzly, and for the head, and you can change colors to your heart's content, and sizes too. But so anyway, for the thread I'm going to be using Semperfli's Nano Silk, and this is in 18/0 brick beige. Do you guys have any experience with Nano Silk at all? No? This stuff is super thin and it's super strong. So anyway, I'm going to start this at the point where I want the wing to start. And just remove the excess. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the dubbing here instead of bringing the thread back to where I want the dubbing to start. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I can minimize thread wraps, and also so I can have a tight noodle further down the line. So I'm going to start my noodle right here, so that way when I wrap down, it's going to start right where I want it to. I'm just using a little bit, and this is an olive superfine. And I could dub it a lot tighter, but for some reason this bug likes to be buggy, so I'm not dubbing it as tight as I could, and I'm doing it on purpose. And the color I'm using is a pale olive, if you wanted to. But once again, you can change the colors of this to basically anything you want to match naturals in your area. I'm kind of putting my finger up here and my nail up here as a gauge to where I don't want to wrap further past that point. And because I started my noodle further down on a bare hook shank, see, I've got thread on the hook shank here, right where I want it to start. And I'm just going to dub a fairly sparse and slightly tapered body. And I don't want to go any further past the initial start point. I'm actually going to back that off just a little bit. Okay. So there's the body. And now, real quick, I'm just going to come through with a single layer of thread, front and back, and that's just to put a base for the wing. Now for the wing, I'm using is natural elk hair. It's not bleached or anything. It's just natural elk hair. And so I'm only going to take a little bit. Actually, what I'm going to do first is kind of take a small clump before I cut it off. And I kind of pinch it, and I want it at least twice the hook gap. And that's about right. I'm taking a little bit more because after I cut this off, you're going to have a whole bunch of underfur and underhair and small stray fibers that we're gonna take out anyways. So I've got my clump here. See all the fluffy stuff? You got to get all that stuff out. And I have a small comb that I use to kind of help with that. Get out all that underfur and the stray, shorter fibers. This is also a good point to check and remove any of the broken tips. And now what I'm going to do is stack this small clump. If you don't remove the underhair and underfluff and stuff before, your hair is not going to want to cooperate with you at all. It's not going to want to stack. So here's my clump of hair. If you see, it's about twice the hook gap, which is about right. And how I measure that, so I'm going to measure for wing length, and I want that wing to be just past the end of the hook. And now the nano silk is notorious for cutting through natural materials. So what I'm going to do is actually flatten out the thread by putting a counterspin in it. And this makes the thread flat so as to be less likely to cut through these natural materials. I'm going to put a couple of wraps and then give it a little bit of pressure. A couple of wraps and a little more pressure. Now I'm going to, if you notice, I didn't release anything until just barely. Now I'm going to take these butt ends and I'm going to come through the butt ends, about a quarter of them, a few more of the butt ends. Now that's all the butt ends. And that way your wing is securely tied in. Now what I'm going to do is, I like to call it the nano silk trick, because this stuff is so strong and so fine, I have to flatten it out to tie in natural materials. Now I'm going to cut the butt ends off with the thread. So how I'm going to do that is, because it's already flat, now I'm going to cord it up with a clockwise spin. And now I've gathered the clump up, and I'm just going to pull it forward and come over once, twice, 3 times. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch and then pull straight down to cut those butt ends off. If you wanted to do a standard elk hair caddis, you could do the same thing and not even have to use your scissors. So now what I'm going to actually do is come through and further clean up those cut ends a little bit. And then come through that with the thread. Now what I'm going to use is time to tie in the hackle. And for the hackle, I'm just going to use a standard saddle hackle. I prefer saddles, mainly because you can get several flies out of one feather instead of, maybe one or two out of a cape feather. And for the barb length, I want the barb to be sized about the hook gap. And how I'm going to orient this is I want those fibers to kind of curve back. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to take a section, I'm going to stand that up, and then whichever side that you want to make contact with the hook first, well, I'm going to expose a tie-in spot first. So that's the bare stem. And now I want this top side, because that's the shiny side, right? And then the dull side. And I want these fibers to curve back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the side that hits the hook first, and I'm just going to pull a little bit off like that. That way, when I tie it in here, I'm going to tie it in just to the start of that first part of the stem. But when I wrap this, my first turn is going to have exposed stem, and that's going to be the side on that'll hit the hook point first. Because a hackle, when you wrap it, is going to take the path of least resistance. So if you encourage how you orient the fibers, you can encourage how it turns. So I'm just going to tie that right in, right there. And I don't know if you can see that, but that's, so I've got the exposed stem, and then I've got fibers already coming. And then I'm just going to tie in the rest of that stem. And then I'm just going to wrap this. So that first turn is exposed stem on the one side, and then it's and then the fibers on the other side. So now I'm just going to, after each turn, I'm going to kind of preen everything back so I can get the hackle butted up turns as tight as possible. And I'm not really concentrated on how many turns it takes. I'm more wanting just a full hackle. Two turns to tie it off, then I'm going to bring everything back. I would finish by hand, but let's see if I can avoid that little burr and not break my line again. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is just kind of stand things up a little bit. And now what I like to do is I like to clip these flat on the bottom. And what that does is help this thing to ride super low in the water. You'll be able to see this thing from quite a ways away, because that elk wing almost glows, even in low light. And but it rides really low in the water, and the fish take it also not only for a caddis, but also in certain mayfly emergers, and then tied small enough, they'll take it for midges too. And And then just to finish it off, I'm going to put a drop of this Loon water-based head cement on it. I like this stuff because it, when it goes on, it like seeps in. I don't know if you saw it seep in. Once that stuff dries, it dries solid. Anyway, that is my PFC. It is one of the most, it's one of my personal confidence flies, and it's a fly that's always a staple in my fly box. It's worked everywhere I've used it, and tied it in several different sizes, several different colors. It works great for stone flies as well, like in big sizes. And that's it. Any questions? No. Okay, the next one I'm kind of going a little bit old school, and I'm gonna be doing it's a parachute hare's ear with a little bit of a twist. So all this is a hare's mask for the body. The tail is Coq de Leon. And for the ribbing on it, which I have a lot of questions about, is this ice blue UV flash blue. And all I'm taking is a single strand of that for the ribbing through the body. And then for the wing post, I'm using Semperfli's Antron yarn. And then for the hackle, I'm just using the almost the same grizzly saddle. You can use any color that you want to, though. I've had good luck with grizzly, Cree, dark barred ginger, speckled badger, any number of. I don't think hackle really matters, the color of it. Anyway, I'm going to tie this on the same hook. It's a Moonlit ML 052 barbless. This is number 16. And I tie these in 16 seem to be the best for me, but I've tied them in 14s and then 18s also, and they all seem to work. For the thread, I'm using the same thread. It's the Nano Silk in 18/0. And so I'm going to start this at the same point, just like the last one. I'm going to start this at the point at where I want my parachute to start. I like my parachutes just north of center. I don't like them like all the way at the eye of the hook. I like them just a little bit, maybe about the 2/3 point. So I'm going to start the thread right there, and take off the excess. Then I'm going to bring the thread all the way to the point where I want, right to the end of the shank, before the bend. And I'm going to take this medium Pardo Coq de Leon. This is just a feather off the cape that I have. I'm only going to take maybe 6 to 8 fibers, and I'm standing straight up from the stem, which aligns the tips. Then I'm just going to pinch and now for the tail length, what I like to do is I like to measure the entire length of the hook, and then a little bit, maybe an eye width past the end for a length. I'd rather have the tail slightly longer than slightly shorter. A longer tail will help it float better. and I don't think the fish really mind either way. So I'm going to take a couple of turns. That's 2 turns to secure it, 3 and 4. Now I'm going to bring my nail right up underneath those, and what that does is that splays the tail. Then I'm going to come around on the bare hook shank and kind of give that a little pull to help lock in that splay. Now I'm going to remove the butt ends of the tailing fiber just to the point where I want the parachute post to start. I'm just going to cover those up and clean those up. On the way back is when I'm going to tie in the ribbing material. And once again, the ribbing material is this ice blue UV Flashaboo. It looks transparent, but when the light catches it just right, it's purpley. It's a really interesting color, and then when the sunlight hits it, it turns colors again in the sunlight. I'm just going to start it right here and then wrap it back to the tail. And then I'm going to come back up just a little ways, because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to dub this, and what I'm going to do is this is just a hare's mask, a natural hare's mask. You can get them all over the place, and they come in a plethora of different colors. This one's just natural, and what I'm going to do is I'm taking some fur right here from about the forehead area, and then this is just a scraper. So all I'm going to do is just scrape a little bit out. So I've got my dubbing here. I don't necessarily want all those guard hairs in, so I'm going to kind of preen it a little bit so I can pull the guard hairs off, because all I want is the nice soft under fur. So now what I'm going to do is start dubbing, and what I'm going to dub is I'm going to dub my noodle on the thread right here, because if you notice, I position my thread a little bit further back, so when I start wrapping my back, my dubbing noodle will start right where I want it to, so I don't have to adjust. And also, so that when you're spinning it on your thread, you're down here where you can actually work with it, instead of up here where you can poke yourself with a hook point, or where your vise is in the way. And what I'm doing is I'm dubbing it fairly tight. This is fairly tight, and it's very thin. So now, because of where I position the thread before where I want the dubbing noodle to start, and then I put the dubbing noodle back here, when I wrap back, by the time I get to the point where I want the dubbing to start, I'm already right there. I didn't have to do anything. So now I'm just going to dub a slight taper. Now I'm only going up to the point where I want my parachute to start, or my parachute post at. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that Flashaboo for the ribbing, and I'm going to counter rivet. So that is opposite the direction my thread's going. I'm just going to put a few turns in there. Then I'm just going to come over and then wrap back over the top of it. Now there's lots of different ways to tie in the parachute post. So once again, I'm going to be using this Semperfli's Antron yarn. This is white. You can use all kinds of stuff, poly yarn, parachute post material, Antron yarn. You can even use calf tail and natural materials, you know, whatever you choose to use. I like to use the Antron yarn because the way I tie it in is a little bit, it's easier for me, and I don't think it makes a huge difference versus like the fish are not going to tell a difference. They're not going to be picky about it. So this is a clump straight off the shank, and some people will set it up on the hook like this or bring it from underneath for a tie-in spot, or some people will set it down here and then clip off the excess. And what I'm doing, and I find that to be kind of wasteful, and this is a way that is easiest for me that I've found. I'm just taking that clump and I'm just gonna put it on the thread like that and hold it with my fingers. Now I'm gonna come over with my opposite hand and grab the clump all together. So it's on the thread like this. Now all I have to do is I bring over that thread with a wrap, and I can position this pretty much anywhere I want it to. I have complete control over that post. So that's about where I want it. And so that's one turn. Now I'm just going to kind of open this up and put two more pretty tight turns in there, and then a couple turns in front, and then a couple turns in back. Then I'm going to go one more in front.
Project Halo Waters fly box.
And now I'm gonna post the material.
Your neighbor there might also want. Pat, you want that? So come on over, pay us some money, and take your gifts away.
I'm not coming up very high on that post.
Rick Jensen.
Maybe about.
Rick Jensen stole.
It's probably the same distance up the post as it is to the front of the shank, just behind the eye.
Test.
And my thread is right there behind the post. Now what I'm going to do is take my hackle, and this is once again, this is just a grizzly, but you can use whatever you want on this. And I like the fibers on my parachute to extend to at least the end of the body from the post. So that's about right. Now, how I like my parachutes is I like the fibers to curve down. Some people like them to curve up. However you decide to orient your feather, I'm going to show you an easy way to orient that how you want your fibers to come up. Personally, on my parachutes, I like it to actually act like a parachute, and that is to look like a parachute. You know, the fibers are curving down off from the top down. And what that does is when you tie it that way, it actually creates an air pocket underneath between the hackle and the body. So when it sits on the water, you need all the flotation you can get. And if your hackle's trapping a pocket of air, an air bubble between it and the body, it's going to float. And so anyway, I'm going to show you how I do that. Now this is just a saddle hackle, and like I said before, I prefer saddles to capes. But so the shiny side is, and then the dull side. And how you do that is I take this and I just stand up some fibers like that, straight from the stem. Now hackles are gonna take the path of least resistance when you turn. So whichever way you want your fibers to orient, take the opposite side to the stem. So that way your first wrap is going to be a bare stem. And so I've stood these up, and now I'm going to create a tie-in spot like this. And I'm giving myself a little bit extra space because I'm going to tie this in and then wrap up to the end of the fibers. Now, because I want this to have the fibers curving down, so that's the shiny side and that's the dull side, I'm going to take the side, I'm going to take a few fibers from this side, so I've just done that. That way, my first turn, no matter how I have this tied in, it's going to take the path of least resistance, and that first turn is going to orient on bare stem around the post on its way down. Now how I'm going to tie this in is I'm going to tie it in directly down. But if you've noticed, so my first fibers are ending right there at the top of the thread wraps on the post. I'm going to take a couple turns behind, and then I'm just going to hold the feather up, support it, and then I'm going to wrap up the post. And then I just once up and once down is plenty. Now I'm going to kind of bring things back and clean up that front end. I'm going to leave my thread right there at the base of the post. Then I'm going to take some more dubbing, kind of preen it out and get rid of some of those longer guard hairs, because all I want is that nice soft under fur. Now I'm just going to dub this on. And I'm dubbing this really tight. And once again, I'm starting a little bit back here so that when I wrap up to the eye, because I'm going to dub from the eye back, not the other way around. So I'm going to wrap up to the eye and then dub back and dub around the post. See that dubbing has started right there because I started the noodle a little bit further back, and I took off some of those thread turns far enough back so that the noodle starts right where I want it to. And I'm going to dub from the hook eye in kind of an opposite taper back to the post. And then I'm going to put a few turns behind the post. Now I've finished with, you want your last turn of dubbing to land right there at the back of the post. And now at the back of the post, I'm going to take one turn around the base of the turn, and then I'm going to leave the thread at the back. Now I'm going to take and wrap the hackle. Now because of how I oriented that first turn, I'm going to have bare stem on one side and then fibers on the other. And I'm just going to take touching turns, one underneath the other one. And I'm kind of pulling the post opposite so I can, what I'm doing is I'm compressing hackle wraps underneath that. So now to tie this off, what I'm going to do is, because my thread's on the back side of the post and I've already taken one turn around it, now all I'm going to do is bring the thread directly out, and then I'm just going to come around one complete turn, and then when I get to where the hackle is, I'm going to drop the hackle and then continue going around one turn. The hackle's tied off, and so now while keeping tension on everything, I'm going to actually just rotate my vise, or you could drop the hook in your vise too, the same way. And then I'm maintaining tension. I'm just going to come around and put a whip finish. I actually whip finish this around the post. But I close the loop with a bodkin on this one. Okay. And now I'm going to maintain tension on the thread. Now to tighten that loop, I'm just going to just rotate my vise back and maintain tension on the thread.
Okay.
Now, if I've done everything right, I should be able to just take the leftover hackle and just pop it right off. The thread and the tighten knot, or the tighten knot from the thread will cut it off. So it's nice and clean. But I still have to, now I'm going to remove the thread. And then I'm going to trim the post. And then I'm going to put another drop of this, but I'm going to rotate this under, and I'm going to catch the thread wraps right underneath the post. All right, that's it. Any questions? No? Okay. All right, guys, thanks for coming out and thanks for stopping by. Again, my name is Paul Shurtleff. I'm over on table number 16 if you want to drop by, and if you have any questions or anything else, be happy to help you out. Hey, thanks, guys.